Hey guys, welcome back to Roots and Refuge Farm. Today's Monday, and this will be the next installment of Mondays with Miah. I took your suggestions and kind of compiled a list of my ideas and what you guys are wanting to see, and I've come up with a list of things we're going to do moving forward, and I'm pretty excited to just share my thoughts on the different topics. Today we're going to talk about feed. So one of the big reasons why people want to get into growing their own food is so they can control what they're feeding the animals that they're later going to eat, and I think that's very important also. I do want to go ahead and say, like, in any of these videos where we talk about what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it, you know, this is just what we've decided based off of our experience, based off of, you know, things that went well, things that didn't go well. As content creators are posting this stuff to really just encourage you and give you guys ideas, and then you take that information and you apply it to your operation as you see fit. So with that being said, you know, let's talk about what we're feeding, and then I'm gonna go over where we're keeping it and the amounts we're distributing. We, as a farm, are not feeding organic feed. There's a couple of reasons. First reason was, up until recently, we could not have afforded organic feed. And two, in Arkansas, sometimes it's difficult to find that kind of feed, or you have to have it mailed in or shipped in, and that also makes it more expensive. Now, we will find the best option that doesn't have any medications. Don't be discouraged if you can't feed your animals organic feed. That should not be a discouragement to you to not be doing chickens or not to get into homesteading. That's something that we really like to work toward. As things move forward, sometimes you can find other options. You can, like I said, watch a video and get some advice and get some inspiration and come up with other solutions. A lot of times what we're feeding is based off what other people are feeding, the similar animals in a similar climate, and we have kind of just adopted that, and then we've tweaked it. You know, just for our own preference and different things. We are feeding the best quality feed that we can get at our local feed store. Some of the mixes we do ourselves, and some of it's just, you know, what they mix up for us. We never use anything that's medicated. Moving forward from here for us, we are still working towards finding different ways to improve the quality of the food that we're providing to our animals. And, you know, as we make changes to that, you know, we'll share those with you. But this will kind of just give you a baseline of what we're doing and why we're doing it, and also how we're storing it to keep rodents and weather away from it. What we've kept our feed in and where we've kept that container has actually changed multiple times. So some of the things we've tried that we've decided they don't work, ended up biting us in the butt, or there was just other complications that we didn't foresee, ended up deciding that wasn't the best way to do it. Now, we initially got containers, I think they were metal trash cans, and we would put those out by the individual area. So like, we'd put one by the chickens, we'd have one by the ducks, we'd have one by the goats, and we would go and put the feed in those cans with a lid on it, and then when we went to feed, we would just take the lid off and we would feed that animal from that location. A couple of things we ran into was, when you go to buy feed, we always do ours like one big purchase at the beginning of the month. So when we would go to distribute it, we'd have to load up, you know, these bags, drive to this particular location, unload it, get it stored inside the container, drive to the next one, store it there. And it seemed like distributing the feed out to just store it in the different locations took a considerable amount of time and was not very convenient or efficient. Second thing was, the goats, bigger animals, would constantly be figuring out how to knock the containers over and get the lids off and get in there and get the feed when they weren't supposed to. Eventually, the lids of the trash can started leaking, and so we would lose feed to rain and mold, and then we'd have to start all over again. We ended up wiping out that idea. So what we did next was, we brought all the trash cans that held all the feed, we brought them onto our back porch. We could distribute all the feed into the buckets, and then it'd all be in one location, and then from that location we would drive to the different areas or walk and feed everything, and then we'd have to bring the buckets back. And that worked better, but still not good. We did that for like 6 to 8 months before I got sick of it. And also all the spillage and the things when the things get knocked over, or if you're scooping and something falls off, it was just building up on the back porch. It was increasing the chances of rodents and things like that. Now, Kitten George basically lives on the back porch for the most part, and so it didn't really affect us, but it could. And so I decided after about 8 months of doing that that wasn't going to work. So that leads us to what I'm doing currently. So when we first started till now, we've upgraded where we store the feed and tried a few things. We are still kind of using the trash cans, but in a little bit of a different way. Let's go real quick the different containers that I'm currently keeping feed in to keep it dry and away from rodents, but also makes it easy to distribute the feed when we buy it, and also easy to access the feed when we need to go feed the animals every day. These are the original cans we got for distributing feed out. So we would keep one can out at the chicken coop and one at the ducks. Now I've got them over here in the central location because they still are good at holding feed, they're just not good at keeping it dry. The next thing that we've started doing is that's actually our old freezer that broke recently. This was actually my mom's freezer and it broke a while ago, and I'm glad that I held on to it. So this right here actually is holding all of our chicken feed for the month, because I actually bought chicken feed for the month of October just like a few days ago. And so this is all of our chicken pellets. So what we're feeding our chickens is a non-medicated layer pellet from a local store that actually mills it here just north of us. So baseline, this is what they eat. Like I said, they get free range, they get garden scraps, they get the pulp from when we juice, we take that out to them and they love eating that. One day I would like to have our personal chickens off of some kind of like fermented fodder system, but we're not there yet, and that's okay to not be ready to take that on. This freezer is actually storing all of our breeder pig feed. Now the reason I say breeder pig is because actually when you're feeding a pig out for meat, you're going to feed it differently than if you're keeping them for breeding to make more piglets. Let me go over what's inside of it, what we're actually using, and then I'll tell you what we're hoping to add to. So this is a mix of crimped oats or whole oats. I think this is crimped because they were out of the whole oats last time. So crimped oats, alfalfa pellets, and black oil sunflower seeds. And we came up with this mixture after talking to a few people that are keeping mangalitzas, similar to what other people are using. We would like to add, I think barley was something that we're looking to add, but honestly I have not found a feed store that's close enough to be able to get it from. When we are growing pigs out, we have used just a regular local milled grower feed. That's what we're hoping to change. If I can work out some pickups for the spent barley out of a brewery, there's a lot of local breweries in Little Rock. If we can work out a deal to get their spent barley from the process, that would be a great feed option for growing stuff out. I'm pretty sure the Honeystead, who also has kept mangalitzas, is the one who told us to look into that because that's what she's fed hers. So the last thing that we're storing feed in that was kind of like a, hey, I have this idea and maybe it'll work, is something you guys have seen before, but it's this truck toolbox that you saw in our backyard. And it's still holding all the goat feed. It works pretty well. I did have some issues with it leaking. I've lost some feed out of it, which is really frustrating because it seemed like when it did happen, there was always a lot of feed in there, and so a lot of feed would go bad rather than it being like a little bit of feed and then I'd only lose a little bit. When I lost like about 2/3 of a month worth of goat feed, I got pretty frustrated at it. And that's when I actually started figuring out, okay, what am I gonna do different? You know, I just built a wood frame real quick that just supports it, and then it latches on top. Now here's the mixture that we're feeding our female goats, and it is a local milled dairy goat pellet that's got the right protein and minerals for it. It's a dehydrated alfalfa, and then what we would call Arkansas a sweet goat feed. That's where you get like the corn, and it's got molasses and some other stuff in it. We do it this way for a couple of reasons. One, because it's good just to kind of have some things mixed up. The dairy goat pellet is less protein, but it has other minerals, and then the alfalfa is higher protein, but it has less minerals, and so they kind of help support each other. So another factor in why we do a 3-feed mix on the goats is that the goats, being ruminants, they like having the same diet. You can't just switch up their diet really quick. It can mess with their digestive system, and you don't want that. Our goat mentor that we got our herd from, he did a very similar thing. Well, one of the reasons why he did it was because if, for example, I don't know if you guys ever go to buy feed and then your feed store is like, oh, sorry, we don't have any more of that, and it's not going to be in for another week because of the truck or this, that, and the other. you know, that happens, and it happens actually kind of off. By mixing 3 different feeds and feeding that to the goats and keeping them regular on that, for example, if one feed was to go out of stock, it's unlikely they're going to be out of stock of all 3. And so you could just mix up the 2 and it would still be very similar to what they're used to eating, and it wouldn't mess with their system so much. Now, if you were feeding just dairy goat pellets and then they ran out and they weren't going to get any for 2 weeks, you could start feeding them alfalfa pellets and you might be messing up their digestive system. That seems to have worked well for us. When the feed stores have run out of feed before, we weren't stuck having to feed them something else that they weren't used to. So another thing is that we like to add supplements to particular animals' feed. Like this is a crushed oyster shell, and we'll add that to the chickens and the ducks. So I'll just give them like just a little scoop because they don't need much. And this is actually a bag of minerals for the goats. I'll show you what it looks like. All right, and so when we go to scoop their feed from the goat feeder, we'll throw, you know, a scoop, an appropriate size scoop of minerals on top of it, so that way when they're out there in the frenzy eating up all their feed, they're getting all the minerals that they need. This trash can right now, actually currently, because the lid fits so tight, this is what's holding just our non-medicated standard alpaca and llama feed. It's basically the only option they had in any feed store anywhere around here. But honestly, we're still learning a lot about that animal in particular, and so trying to figure out a different is just not that high of a priority right now. And so we're just going to stick to feeding alpaca pellet, as they call it, until we decide that it's time to change. And so that can holds our horse feed, and essentially it's just a pretty high quality horse pellet that we get from the feed store. Comes pretty highly recommended from the guys that run the place. They said it's what they feed their horses, and they've got some pretty good looking horses, so I trusted them. And honestly, since switching to this particular horse pellet, our horses honestly look pretty good. The only things we didn't go over is the ducks, but they eat the same layer of pellets that the chickens eat. It's all stored right here. Okay, so the only feed that's not stored right here is the quail feed. They're still behind the barn. They're actually about to find a new home, and so I'm not even going to go over there. But essentially, they eat a crumble because they're small birds. They can't eat pellets, and it's a crumble made specifically for like quail or pheasants and things like that. I do want to talk about why I have the feed next door rather than on my back porch. And honestly, so far, this has been my favorite feeding, distribution, and restock system that I've come up with in location and just for convenience. And let me go over why that is. One of the things about storing feed is that if you're gonna buy a large amount of it, you need to be able to keep it dry and keep it away from rodents, because then they're gonna eat your investment or ruin your investment. And we've learned the hard way, like I said, on what works and what doesn't work with that. The reason why we moved this stuff over here, the first reason why, is because this awning actually covers all of our containers. The goat feed toolbox that was leaking a little bit, it's now covered from the rain, and it will not have any more leaking, and that has allowed me to actually fill it up without having to worry about it leaking and losing a bunch of feed. The freezers, they're under the awning, they're protected. The trash cans, they're under the awning, they're protected. If you don't have that option, you're just gonna have to buy less amount. You're gonna have to go to the feed store more often, because you don't want to buy feed and then like I said, let it get spoiled or chewed on by things that you're not trying to feed expensive feed to. Now, the second reason why we moved it over here is because, see, that's the four-wheeler. Those are the feed buckets, and I've got this path goes right through to my house over there. And so when we go to feed, I've got all the buckets here. I'll basically distribute all the feed based off of, you know, it's 3 scoops for the goat, 1 scoop each for the breeder pigs, you know, 3 scoops for the chickens, 2 for the ducks, and then the alpacas, they each actually only get 1 cup each. And so I get all that together and I load it in the trailer, and then I take off on the four-wheeler. I'll pull forward, I'll go and I'll feed the females, refresh their water, make sure they have hay. I keep the hay in this little trailer right here. And then I'll go from there to the quail, from the quail to the goats, from the goats around to the chickens, and from the chickens over to the backyard, which is where we keep the ducks, the male alpacas, and the pigs are at the far back. It's actually, you know, made it very efficient, and I would show you guys, you know, going around and doing it, except today was actually Ben Turn's turn to feed, because he's here today, and he got here and did it before I was out here. Everything's already been fed today. I'm sure you guys can imagine, you know, what it would look like if we were to drive around on the four-wheeler and distribute the feed to everything. Being able to keep all the feed in one location has not only helped with when we go to distribute the feed to the animals. When we go to buy the bulk feed, I can open the gate, back the truck up to right here, or I can leave the truck next door and use the four-wheelers and the trailer to move it over here. And then I'm literally just basically grabbing them one time off the trailer, dumping it in, and mixing everything up, rather than having to go upstairs or to go around to the backyard and different things. So far, this has been my favorite system as far as convenience and efficiency. For feeding everything. Well guys, that's all I got for today. I hope it's interesting. I hope it's helpful. I'm so excited because Jessica comes back today. It's been 4 days and I miss her very, very much. I'm gonna get out of here, guys, and I'm actually gonna go finish cleaning up our house so she comes home to a nice clean house. I hope this was helpful. I bless you guys. Until next time.